A high-pitched alarm shredded the pre-dawn stillness as Lieutenant Kara Hayes crouched behind the overturned transport crate, pulse hammering against her ribs. Smoke curled around her boots, and somewhere in the darkness, a panicked voice whispered, "For backup that wouldn't arrive until after dawn." Kara's gloved hand found the grip of her modular pulse rifle, every inch of her lean frame coiled in readiness. She inhaled, tasting metal and sweat, as the first flare of electrical discharge lit the compound's perimeter wall. Drapa, if you've ever been underestimated. Her boot heels clicked against the concrete as she slipped through the shadows, each step measured. In the low light, her unit patch was just another piece of vinyl until now. The training compound at Fort Callahan had the sterile precision of a panic room, with grid lines painted on every surface and drones buzzing overhead like angry hornets. Routine drills played on loop: search and rescue, threat neutralization, advanced medical triage. For most, it was another checkpoint on the career path. But for Kara, each day was a reminder of the legacy she carried. Her father had been a renowned sniper in the Joint Special Operations Command, his legacy immortalized in whispered legends. Her mother, an elite combat medic, had patched soldiers back from the edge of death. They were her silent mentors, woven into every practiced movement. Early mornings found Kara on the range, cleaning barrels and calibrating sights with a precision that belied her calm expression. She worked alongside squads of hardened privates and decorated sergeants who gave her polite nods never full. Acknowledgement. Comment your hidden talent below if you've ever been doubted. She knew her place. Slender silhouette in a sea of broad shoulders, technical specialist rather than a frontline warrior. She patched simulation wounds with steady hands, rewired tactical drones for disaster response protocols, and logged sensor calibrations with near-obsessive accuracy. Routine, rhythm, repetition until the scheduled simulation that morning went sideways. At 0530 hours, the base announced a full-scale disaster simulation, a chemical spill in the quake-damaged sector of the facility with hostages trapped inside. The scenario required cross-functional teams: medics, engineers, security operators. Kara's group was last to be called, an oversight that suited her fine. When the emergency siren blared, she grabbed her kit: respirator, pulse rifle, field med pack. As she moved toward the staging area, she overheard Sergeant Miller scoff, "Where's tech support? You think you'll code us out of this one, Lieutenant?" She met his gaze, her gray eyes unwavering. "Just watch." He shrugged and led his squad through the reinforced doors. Inside Sector Delta, the lights flickered. An acrid haze clung to the air. Cries for help echoed off the battered walls. The operators in front struggled to identify the biohazard signature. Their scanners glitched under the overload. Kara slipped past them, kneeling beside a fallen sensor rack. Her fingers danced across the panel, rerouting power and recalibrating frequency bands. A soft click and the sensors hummed to life, painting a clear map of the contaminant's reach. She tapped her COM. "Alpha, I have a safe corridor. Follow my feed." Moments later, the squad surged forward on her path. Miller's voice crackled, "Nice work, Tech." But his tone was begrudging respect, not surprised. Drapa, if you've ever had to prove yourself all over again. The corridor opened onto an overturned transport vehicle, its doors mangled. Inside, 2 hostages, 1 elderly scientist, 1 juvenile technician gasped for breath under a leaking containment system. Kara scanned the chemical dispersal valve. With deft fingers, she bypassed the corroded seal, isolating the leak. She pulled a med pack, treating the scientist's chemical burns, then signaled for extraction. Suddenly, a deafening crack. Structural supports gave way upstairs. Debris rained down, severing the only exit. Panic surged through the team. Miller barked, "We're trapped. What now?" She met his eyes. "Follow me." Her slender frame darted past splintered beams and scorched cables. She hopped across a gaping chasm where the floor had collapsed, gripping the edge with silent strength. One by one, the squad followed her improvised bridge. At the far end, an emergency hatch stood ajar, its manual override jammed. Kara shrugged off her pack and laid out her tools: precision screwdrivers, emergency torque wrench, a custom hacking module inherited from her mother's med bay days. Under the flicker of an automated lamp, she worked with clinical focus, every movement honed by years of hidden training. Sparks flew as Metal Gear surrendered to her persistence. With a final twist, the hatch released. Smoke and fear gave way to fresh air and the din of alert sirens. She led the group through a service corridor, the hostages between them, until they burst into the safety of the command center. Silence fell. The base commander himself stood at the entrance, a tall figure in midnight blue fatigues, decorated chest like a constellation of medals. He scanned the survivors, gaze drifting to Kara's uniform. His eyes narrowed at the plain patch on her shoulder, a simple shield logo, the mark of the Emergency Response Tech Corps, an overlooked outfit. In the larger military framework, he leaned forward. "Tech Corps, Lieutenant Hayes?" She straightened. "Yes, sir." He studied her for a moment, then extended a hand. "Lieutenant Hayes, until you rerouted those sensors and extracted those hostages under fire, I admit I didn't know your unit existed. Well done." As he turned to debrief the team, Kara's heart hammered, not from adrenaline, but anticipation. Today, her patch meant something. Late that night, in the dim glow of her quarters, Kara stared at the unit emblem. Its colors seemed more vivid now. She closed her eyes and recalled her mother's words. "Precision under pressure, that's our legacy." A soft chime signaled an incoming message on her tablet. It was from the commander. "Report at 0600 hours. We'll discuss tomorrow's mission." Her pulse stuttered. Tomorrow, she thought. They'll see what I can do. Press, if you're ready for more. This mission was only the beginning. A path lay ahead, marked by expectation and doubt. But Kara Hayes knew one truth: hidden expertise, once revealed, could reshape the rules. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow, I have a special story for you. Dawn broke in bruised streaks of violet and gray as Kara Hayes stood alone on the frost-glazed tarmac. Her breath misted around her respirator while the training compound roared to life behind her, drone rotors whirring, armored trucks idling in rows like restless beasts. She adjusted the patch on her uniform, its edges crisp, now that the base commander himself had acknowledged her. But acknowledgement came with a price. "Lieutenant Hayes." A voice snapped her attention back to the world. Sergeant Miller, still smudged with the grime of last night's extraction, jogged up. He looked different this morning, less smirk, more calculation. "Commander wants you at the new disaster site. Chemical dispersal at the West Quarantine Wing. Civilian contractors involved. You're leading the tech crew." She blinked. "I'm not cleared to lead ops. You are now." He tapped the fresh clearance slip tucked into her tablet. "Until the base commander read her unit patch, huh? Well, now we're stuck with you." His attempt at a joke fell flat. She shouldered her kit and turned toward the convoy. If he wanted her to fail, he'd have to wait. Drop a "if you've ever been thrown in the deep end just to prove you can swim." The convoy lurched forward through a maze of concrete, barricades, and razor wire fences. Kara rode in the back, surrounded by crates of sealed biohazard suits, sensor drones, and rebrother kits. She ran diagnostics in her head: oxygen levels, battery charges, chemical scrubber capacities, each check calming her breath. She thought of her father's old saying: "Measure twice, breathe once, shoot straight." They reached the West Quarantine Wing, a low, brutalist block half-eaten by last week's tremor. Emergency lights pulsed a dull red as medics ferried the wounded out on stretchers. A contractor in hazmat overalls staggered toward her, voice muffled through his mask. "There's a gas leak in the sublevel. Our comms went dead 10 minutes ago. We lost 3 men. Kara nodded, scanning the access hatch. The outer seal was scorched black, hinges warped. She unlatched her field kit and began stripping wires, sensors, and modules. Each piece felt familiar, her mother's lessons in pressure dressing, her father's lessons in the art of unjamming. She could feel them at her shoulders now. Unseen but undeniable dot inside the sublevel. Darkness pressed in like a living thing. Her boots squelched through ankle-deep runoff as she wove between broken piping and collapsed ductwork. Her team followed, eyes wide behind fogged goggles. "Lieutenant, are you sure about this route?" one asked. His voice wavered. Kara paused, scanned the flickering gas meter on her wrist. Just like calibrating her father's old sniper scope, wind, drift, range, angle. She adjusted her route by 7 meters, gestured for the team to split. Half the squad would isolate the leak upstream. The other half would sweep for the missing contractors. Minutes turned into an hour of crawling through jagged corridors and hissing valves. The deeper they went, the thicker the gas stung Kara's eyes. She bit back the sting, drawing steady. On memory, breathe once, shoot straight. A faint voice called out from behind a fallen support beam. She scrambled over debris, spotting a man pinned under a collapsed air duct, his respirator askew. One arm was bent at a grotesque angle. "Hey, I'm Lieutenant Hayes, I'm getting you out." His eyes flickered open, disbelief warring with relief. Kara worked the portable lift wedge beneath the duct, bracing it with her shoulder as the servos. Word. Her arms trembled but held steady. When the beam shifted enough, she dragged the contractor out, hooking his arm around her shoulders. His breath rasped in her ear. Never seeing a Tech Corps officer do that. "Get used to it," she grunted. They staggered back through the sublevel. Above them, the floor shuddered more structural compromise. Kara motioned for the team to retreat. Her lungs burned. Her thoughts sharpened. If she failed now, it would validate every doubter. If she succeed, an explosion rocked the corridor behind them. Heat seared her back. She dropped low, covering the contractor as dust and flame chased. Then through the breach, they emerged blinking into dawn, coughing up ash and toxic residue. The waiting squad gawked, half respect, half disbelief. Lieutenant Hayes reporting. Leak contained. Missing found. Extraction successful. Miller offered her a canteen. Guess the base commander knew what he was doing. She took it, lips dry. "We're just getting started." Back in her quarters, Kara scrubbed grime from her arms, the patch on her uniform now lined with soot. She traced it with her thumb. Not so overlooked anymore. Her tablet buzzed. A new directive. Report to the base hangar at 0400. Mission brief classified. She exhaled, shoulders tight. So this was her new reality, emergency after emergency. No time to breathe. Drop a, if you've ever felt the weight of new expectations. She lay back on her bunk, the hum of the compound a lullaby of risk. In her dreams, she heard her father's slow drawl, her mother's sharp instructions. They reminded her that mastery is measured in moments like these, when the smoke clears, and your worth stands undeniable. Outside, the base lights burned. All night, waiting for the dawn. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow, I have a special story for you. Dawn broke in bruised streaks of violet and gray as Kara Hayes stood alone on the frost-glazed tarmac. Her breath misted around her respirator while the training compound roared to life behind her, drone rotors whirring, armored trucks idling, in rows like restless beasts. She adjusted the patch on her uniform, its edges crisp, now that the base commander himself had acknowledged her. But acknowledgement came with a price. "Lieutenant Hayes." A voice snapped her attention back to the world. Sergeant Miller, still smudged with the grime of last night's extraction, jogged up. He looked different this morning, less smirk, more calculation. Commander wants you at the new disaster site. Chemical dispersal at the West Quarantine Wing. Civilian contractors involved. You're leading the tech crew." She blinked. "I'm not cleared to lead ops. You are now." He tapped the fresh clearance slip tucked into her tablet. "Until the base commander read her unit patch, huh? Well, now we're stuck with you." His attempt at a joke fell flat. She shouldered her kit and turned toward the convoy. If he wanted her to fail, he'd have to wait. Drop a "if you've ever been thrown in the deep end" just to prove you can swim. The convoy lurched forward through a maze of concrete, barricades, and razor wire fences. Kara rode in the back, surrounded by crates of sealed biohazard suits, sensor drones, and rebreather kits. She ran diagnostics in her head: oxygen levels, battery charges, chemical scrubber capacities, each check calming her breath. She thought of her father's old saying, "Measure twice, breathe once, shoot straight." They reached the West Quarantine Wing, a low, brutalist block half-eaten by last week's tremor. Emergency lights pulsed a dull red as medics ferried the wounded out on stretchers. A contractor in hazmat overalls staggered toward her, voice muffled through his mask. "There's a gas leak in the sublevel. Our comms went dead 10 minutes ago. We lost 3 men." Kara nodded, scanning the access hatch. The outer seal was scorched black, hinges warped. She unlatched her field kit and began stripping wires, sensors, and modules. Each piece felt familiar: her mother's lessons in pressure dressing, her father's lessons in the art of unjamming. She could feel them at her shoulders now. Unseen but undeniable dot inside the sublevel, darkness pressed in like a living thing. Her boots squelched through ankle-deep runoff as she wove between broken piping and collapsed ductwork. Her team followed, eyes wide behind fogged goggles. "Lieutenant, are you sure about this route?" one asked. His voice wavered. Kara paused, scanned the flickering gas meter on her wrist. Just like calibrating her father's old sniper scope: wind, drift, range, angle. She adjusted her route by 7 meters, gestured for the team to split. Half the squad would isolate the leak upstream. The other half would sweep for the missing contractors. Minutes turned into an hour of crawling through jagged corridors and hissing valves. The deeper they went, the thicker the gas stung Kara's eyes. She bit back the sting, drawing steady. "On memory, breathe once, shoot straight." A faint voice called out from behind a fallen support beam. She scrambled over debris, spotting a man pinned under a collapsed air duct, his respirator askew. One arm was bent at a grotesque angle. "Hey, I'm Lieutenant Hayes. I'm getting you out." His eyes flickered open, disbelief warring with relief. Kara worked the portable lift wedge beneath the duct, bracing it with her shoulder as the servos. Word. Her arms trembled but held steady. When the beam shifted enough, she dragged the contractor out, hooking his arm around her shoulders. His breath rasped in her ear. Never seen a Tech Corps officer do that. "Get used to it," she grunted. They staggered back through the sublevel. Above them, the floor shuddered more structural compromise. Kara motioned for the team to retreat. Her lungs burned. Her thoughts sharpened. If she failed now, it would validate every doubter. If she succeed, an explosion rocked the corridor behind them. Heat seared her back. She dropped low, covering the contractor as his dust and flame chased them through the breach. They emerged blinking into dawn, coughing up ash and toxic residue. The waiting squad gawked, half respect, half disbelief. Lieutenant Hayes reporting. Leak contained. Missing found. Extraction successful. Miller offered her a canteen. Guess the base commander knew what he was doing. She took it, lips dry. "We're just getting started." Back in her quarters, Kara scrubbed grime from her arms, the patch on her uniform now lined with soot. She traced it with her thumb. Not so overlooked anymore. Her tablet buzzed. A new directive. Report to the base hangar at 0400. Mission brief classified. She exhaled, shoulders tight. So this was her new reality, emergency after emergency. No time to breathe. Drop us if you've ever felt the weight of new expectations. She lay back on her bunk, the hum of the compound a lullaby of risk. In her dreams, she heard her father's slow drawl, her mother's sharp instructions. They reminded her that mastery is measured in moments like these, when the smoke clears, and your worth stands undeniable. Outside, the base lights burned. All night, waiting for the dawn. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow, I have a special story for you. The wind clawed at Kara Hayes' cheeks as she jogged across the training yard at dawn, the sting waking her more than the bitter coffee in her thermos. The compound never slept. Drones hummed, steel doors slammed, recruits barked orders. But this morning felt different. Every passing operator offered her the same curious glance, half challenge, half reluctant recognition. She kept her eyes forward, her boots tracing the path to Hangar 2, where the base commander had summoned her for a new briefing. She shifted the rifle strap on her shoulder, fingertips grazing the patch that had once been her camouflage. Now it was a beacon. Drop it if you've ever felt the weight of people's eyes the moment you start to succeed. Inside Hangar 2, rows of armored transports lined the walls, each bristling with rescue gear and weapons. Caches. A handful of men in heavy tactical vests huddled near the mission boards, their low murmurs cutting off when Kara approached. Captain Rowe stood waiting, tablet in hand. He nodded at her patch, then held out the device. Underground quake damage. Near the old supply tunnels, he said. Stability sensors went offline last night. Local security tried to access the tunnel node, but the structural integrity is worse than we thought. We need eyes down there, your eyes. Kara thumbed through the schematics. The tunnels looked like a rat's nest, pipes crisscrossing maintenance shafts and sealed chambers that hadn't seen daylight in decades. Biohazards? She asked. Rose's mouth twitched. They say no, but you know better. She did. She'd learned early that safe was just an optimistic guess. By 0700, she was on the edge of the compound, the sun just beginning to burn through the gray. Her team was smaller this time. 4 operators, a drone pilot, and Miller, who stood off to the side, tapping his boot against a crate of chemical rebreathers. Looks like the commander trusts you more than the sensors, Miller said. His tone was neutral, maybe even respectful. Maybe. Kara adjusted the strap on her field kit. They trust results. That's all that matters. She pulled her gloves tighter, feeling the press of the diagnostic wand strapped to her thigh. Memories of her father's workbench flickered in her mind. Precision, patience, repeat. Drop a. If you've ever had to remind yourself you've earned your place. The entrance to the tunnels yawned wide and damp, stale air drifting up like a warning. Kara's boots sank into the soft, muddy floor as she ducked under rusted conduit lines. The drone pilot launched a small quadritor, its camera feed flickering onto her wrist display. Node's about 50 meters in, the pilot said. Should be straightforward if the floor holds, Kara grunted. Straightforward never stayed that way. They moved slowly, boots scraping against old grating and waterlogged concrete. The deeper they went, the more the stale air turned sharp chemical. Traces, maybe mold, maybe worse. Her sensors pinged erratically. She stopped near an intersection where 2 tunnels split like a forked tongue. One path was submerged halfway up the walls, oily sheen dancing across the surface. The other was littered with broken conduit and collapsed. Support beams. Better to crawl than swim, she said. The others hesitated. She didn't. She slipped through the narrow crawl space, the drone humming just ahead. Metal scraped her pack as she inched forward, breath steady. The node chamber was only 10 meters away. She could almost feel the hum of old data lines buried in the walls. Her mother's voice echoed in her head. Get in, fix it, get out. She reached the node's access panel, a battered steel box plastered with warning tape and faded serial numbers. She unspooled her diagnostic cables, fingers moving in that practiced rhythm she'd learned patching up soldiers in field tents as a kid. The moment her wand touched the circuit board, the sensors flared red. A faint hiss echoed behind her. Gas. Leak. Droppa. If you've ever felt that gut punch when something goes wrong but you can't flinch. She clamped her respirator tighter, barking into her cum. Gas pocket breached. Back out now. This tunnel's unstable, Miller. Pull the drone pilot back. Too late. A groan of shifting concrete echoed overhead. She shoved the panel shut, grabbed her gear, and scrambled back through the crawlspace as dust and debris rained down. Her pulse thundered in her ears. Back in the main shaft, the others were already retreating. Miller caught her arm, his eyes wide behind his visor. You good? Keep moving, she snapped. Tunnel's done. They stumbled into the flooded passage, boots splashing through chemical runoff. Kara checked her wrist display. One more exit. A maintenance ladder that might still connect to the surface. Miller moved up beside her. Steady now. I know a shortcut. This way. The shortcut turned into a nightmare. The corridor narrowed, water rising to their waists. Kara's sensors struggled to parse the chemical traces swirling through the sludge. Every breath tasted metallic through her filter. She caught herself glancing at Miller, not for confirmation, but for the familiar sting of disbelief she'd come to expect. But he just watched her, waiting for direction. Drones up front. Stick to the left wall. It's stronger, she ordered. They sloshed forward, each step echoing like a drumbeat. Somewhere behind them, a pipe split with a wet pop, sending a jet of foul-smelling gas into the chamber. Kara's thoughts flickered to her mother's steady hands, steady breath. She reached the service ladder first, checking the old bolts for rust. It'll hold, she muttered. Droppa. If you've ever had to hold it together when you were out of options. The climb was slow, the ladder groaning under the weight of 4 operators, Miller and Kara's kit. The top hatch opened onto an old supply shed behind the compound's west perimeter wall. Sunlight felt unreal on her shoulders. Miller pulled his mask off, coughing. Tech Cores saves the day again, huh? Kara just shook her head, smudging grime off her patch. Tech Cores does what it's trained to do. They filed into the debrief tent an hour later, wet boots, battered gear, and a line of skeptical brass waiting to hear how a slender lieutenant from an overlooked unit had done what half a platoon couldn't. Kara stood at the front, shoulders back. The patch on her arm felt heavier than any metal. Questions? She asked. Silence. She almost smiled. Droppa. If you know, sometimes silence is the loudest respect of all. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow, I have a special story for you. Kara Hayes felt every muscle in her back protest as she rolled her shoulders. The tension still wound tight from the tunnel crawl. The training compound pulsed around her like a living machine, convoys rolling out, squads jogging in formation, towers blinking like watchful eyes. She watched it all through the steam rising from her battered metal coffee mug, her reflection warped in the black surface. The patch on her uniform sleeve had become its own kind of rumor. Whispers trailed her footsteps, now operators, rookies. Even the old guard gave her nods that lingered longer than they used to. Respect was a currency she'd paid for in sweat and quiet competence. But the debt never stayed settled for long. Droppa. If you've ever learned that one win means the next test is bigger. She was halfway to the drone bay when she spotted Sergeant Miller leaning against a rusted cargo crate, his arms crossed, helmet hanging from one hand. Lieutenant Hayes, he said, drawing out her rank like a challenge. Commander wants you on the perimeter detail tonight. Rumors of infiltration drills, full blackout, live fire blanks, all that jazz. Kara cocked an eyebrow. And you're here because? He grinned, the scar on his chin catching the early sunlight. I'm leading it. Figured you'd want a head start. She tapped her wrist display, pulling up the schematic of the outer perimeter. We'll need sensors retuned for the blackout. Thermal's useless if they're using insulated gear. Miller let out a low whistle, already strategizing. TechCore's overachiever. She ignored him, her mind already miles ahead, mapping choke points and fallback lines. A creeping unease tickled the edge of her thoughts. Infiltration drills were routine, but the commander wouldn't send her unless there was a chance the drill wasn't just a drill. By dusk, the compound's perimeter lights dimmed one by one until the entire western sector was swallowed by the dark. Kara crouched beside a stack of supply crates, her diagnostic wand glowing faint green in her gloved hand. The comms channel hissed with the low chatter of Miller's squad, setting trip lines and re-rigging sensor nodes. She moved with the quiet precision her parents had drilled into her father's sniper's patience, her mother's medic's calm. She double-checked each node, fingers flicking across the frequency bands. "Lieutenant," Miller's voice crackled in her earpiece. "We've got movement near Sector C. Could be the infiltration team. Or could be real Kara." Finished for him. She didn't flinch. "Keep your eyes open. Drop a. If you've ever worked twice as hard because you knew someone was waiting for you to fail. It started with a flicker, a single sensor dropping offline. Then two more. In a line that carved a path straight toward the motor pool." Kara's wristband vibrated against her skin, every alert pulse syncing with her heartbeat. She signaled Miller, her hand slicing through the dark. "Cut the overheads. All thermal eyes on the breach line. I'm moving up." Miller's team shifted like shadows, their boots silent on the gravel. Kara ducked through the maze of cargo pallets, the wand in her hand flickering as it swept the air for heat signatures. At the edge of the lot, she froze. A figure moved between two armored trucks, too fluid, too careful for a rookie on a training. She pressed her back against the cold metal, every sense straining. Her father's voice in her mind. Wait, observe, act. She counted the seconds between the figure's steps, the rhythm of breath and footfall. When she moved, it was instinct. She lunged, tackling the figure into the side of the truck. They hit the metal with a dull clang. The intruder hissed a curse, swinging an elbow that glanced off her shoulder pad. In the struggle, her glove tore the patch on her sleeve. The TechCore's insignia flapped loose, but she didn't care. She pinned the intruder's arm, twisting, until the knife clattered to the gravel. Miller's squad appeared out of the dark like wraiths. One of them flicked on a tactical lamp, illuminating the intruder's gear non-reg issue. Custom thermal mask, insulated fabric. Not a drill. Drop up a custom thermal mask. Insulated fabric. Not a drill. If you've ever had your gut feeling proven right. They dragged the would-be infiltrator back to the command tent. Kara sat on the folding bench outside, the adrenaline draining from her limbs. The patch she'd torn now lay in her lap. The threads frayed, but the shield still visible under the dust and sweat. Miller emerged from the tent, his face set in a grim line. Commanders putting the base on alert. Whoever this is, they weren't alone. TechCores just became our lead recon unit. She met his eyes. Then we do what we're trained to do. He gestured to her torn patch. Get that stitched. You've earned every thread. Hours later, the compound buzzed like a kicked hornet's nest. Patrols doubled, drones zipped overhead, and Kara found herself in the drone bay, tuning flight paths with a new authority. Operators leaned in as she spoke, her quiet tone commanding the same respect as a barked order. Nodes recalibrated every 10 minutes, she said. If they slip past our eyes, they'll hit a net they can't see. Coming. A young private lifted a brow. TechCore's running Overwatch? She gave him a tight smile. TechCore's running point. Drop it if you've ever stepped up when no one else would. When the first recon drone pinged movement beyond the northern perimeter fence, Kara didn't hesitate. She led the patrol herself, boots crunching frostbitten grass as dawn threatened. The horizon. They moved like ghosts, silent, watchful, lethal. They found the second infiltrator tangled in barbed wire, a tranquil dart still quivering in his neck. No firefight, no panic. Just clean, precise action. Just how Kara had always worked hidden until the moment she needed to be seen. Back in the control room, the base commander stood over a live feed of the compound's perimeter, his expression unreadable. "Lieutenant Hayes," he said, voice low but clear. "You and your team just shut down a breach that would have compromised this entire facility. They'll write that down, you know. They'll remember." Kara glanced at her patch, now restitched, thread lines tight and proud. "It's not the patch they'll remember, sir. It's what it means." His eyes twinkled for just a heartbeat. "And what does it mean, Lieutenant?" She lifted her chin. "It means underestimated doesn't mean unprepared." The commander nodded, turning back to the live feed. The sun rose beyond the wire fences, painting the compound in stark gold. Kara's reflection in the glass was clear, small, but unbreakable. Droppa, if you know, sometimes the smallest mark carries the biggest weight. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow, I have a special story for you. Kara Hayes awoke to the hum of low voices and the metallic scent of gun oil drifting through the barracks. She blinked hard against the overhead light, the old bunk springs creaking as she sat up. Her uniform lay neatly folded on the footlocker, her freshly stitched Tech Corps patch resting on top like a silent promise. She ran a thumb along the threads, tiny, perfect lines she'd earned stitch by stitch in crawl spaces, blackout drills, and half-collapsed tunnels. Outside the window, dawn cut the yard into slices of golden shadow. The base never truly slept. And neither did the doubt's whispers that her last success had been luck, a fluke, that the Tech Corps was only meant to fix wires and patch drones. But now the perimeter breach had changed everything. And the next test was already waiting. Droppa, if you've ever known the second you succeed, the next fight finds you. By midday, she was back in Hangar 4, kneeling beside crates of recon drones that rattled whenever the wind slipped through. The massive rolling doors. Sergeant Miller stood a few feet away, pacing like a restless wolf. Commander wants live eyes on the old munitions silos. Satellite flagged unusual heat signatures in one of the sealed bunkers. Could be faulty readings, could be more uninvited guests. Miller said. Kara's fingers danced over the drone chassis, checking rotor calibrations and power cells. Let's assume it's worse. I'll take a unit out myself. Miller arched an eyebrow. And leave the operators standing around looking pretty? She shot him a tight grin. They can cover the exit routes. These tunnels don't forgive mistakes. She finished assembling the last drone, its sensors humming to life, then stood. The weight of her field pack settled on her shoulders, grounding her in a way metals never could. The convoy crawled through the outer fence line, tires crunching gravel and old frost. Kara rode in the lead transport, eyes fixed on the horizon where the abandoned silos loomed, hulking metal relics from wars fought decades ago. The squad behind her fidgeted with weapons and masks, but she focused on the diagnostic wand in her pocket. The real fight would be quiet, precise, and hidden in the dark corners where others feared to look. They reached the perimeter just as the wind shifted, carrying the stale, heavy scent of oil and decaying metal. Kara stepped out first, boots sinking into the frozen mud. The silo's massive hatch gaped open at a crooked angle, hinges crusted with rust. Thermal scans pick up movement? She asked the drone pilot. He shook his head. Interference. Could be the old insulation, could be someone blocking it. Kara finished, her mind already dissecting possibilities. Droppa, if you've ever felt your pulse race, when you realized you're the only one ready. Inside the silo, the air was stale and cold enough to bite through her gloves. She slipped ahead of the squad, the drone's feed bouncing across her wrist, display like a living map. The deeper they went, the more the concrete walls narrowed into a tight corridor lined with ancient storage racks and corroded fuel cells. She paused near a sealed maintenance hatch. Her sensors danced small, irregular heat spikes. Not rats. Not structural bleed. Human. She motioned for the squad to circle the side passages, her own breath steady in the recycled air of her respirator. The hatch lock was old, an analog relic. Kara felt a flicker of her mother's lessons. Every lock has a pulse, every circuit a rhythm. She bypassed the dead battery, patched in her portable charge pack, and waited for the lock to stutter open. Inside was a cramped control booth lined with dead screens. But near the back wall, a pile of canvas tarps moved. She drew her sidearm low, stepping closer. "Show me your hands." A boy couldn't have been older than 17 crawled out, eyes wide under a grimy beanie. His jacket bore no insignia, just patched sleeves and a makeshift respirator made from plastic sheeting. Drop a. If you've ever had to decide in a heartbeat who's threat and who's just desperate, Kara's mind flicked through the briefings. No local civvy should have been near the silos. The boy's cheeks were sunken, lips cracked from dehydration. He clutched a battered field radio to his chest. "Who else is here?" she asked softly. He shook his head so fast it made her stomach twist. "No one, just me. I didn't know, I swear. I heard they left supplies down here." She lowered her weapon. "You found more than that. This heat signature isn't just you." A faint scuff echoed beyond the booth door. She pushed the boy behind her as Miller's voice barked through coms. "We've got contact on the east wall. Multiple. Hostiles, unknown IDs." So it hadn't been just a rumor. Someone had been stockpiling these old silos, and they'd left enough evidence to catch Satellite's eyes. Kara turned to the boy. "Stay down, no matter what." She bolted out into the corridor, rifle up, pulse hammering in her throat. Gunfire barked in the distance, echoes bouncing like thunder in the confined space. She caught up with Miller crouched behind an overturned crate. "Company?" she asked, ducking beside him. He pointed to the far end of the silo where two figures darted behind fuel barrels, shadows twisting in the flickering light of Kara's drone. Smugglers, maybe. Or something bigger, but they're cornered now. She watched the drone feed thermal outlines sharp and clear. One slip and this whole room would turn into a firestorm. Drop a. If you've ever had to keep your hands steady when everything's flammable. She motioned for Miller to flank right while she slipped left, moving between metal barrels stacked. Too high. The floor vibrated with the distant rumble of someone's footsteps pounding for the exit. Kara caught one of the figures trying to slip through a side door. She tackled him hard, the impact jarring her shoulder. He fought like an animal, breath ragged under his mask, but Kara's grip held. A sharp elbow, a twist, a knee braced on the cold concrete, just like her father's old hand-to-hand drills. The man slumped. She checked his pockets, maps, old security keycards. Nothing that told her who he worked for. Miller's voice came through the static. "Second one down. Secure the area." By the time they dragged both intruders back to the convoy, dawn had broken fully, washing the silo's crumbling exterior in pale yellow light. The boy huddled near the trucks, knees pulled to his chest. Kara crouched beside him. "They recruit you?" He shook his head. "They didn't know I was here. I just wanted food." She looked back at the silo, her mind already assembling 100 questions the brass would want answered. But deep down, she knew this was only a glimpse, one more fracture line in a compound that thought it was untouchable. If you've ever realized the real problem is deeper than anyone wants to admit. Back at the compound, she sat in the debriefing room while the captured intruders were dragged away for interrogation. The base commander stood at the head of the table, arms crossed. "Lieutenant Hayes," he said, voice low, "these silos were supposed to be sealed years ago. What you found means someone's been lying or planning." Kara's eyes drifted to her patch, the thread still dark with grime. We'll find out who and why. He leaned closer. You understand this makes you a threat, don't you? A Tech Corps officer asking questions most people would rather bury. She met his stare, steady. Then they can bury me when I'm done. His mouth twitched almost a smile. Almost. Good, because you're not done yet. Outside the compound, lights burned like stars against the endless dark. And somewhere in that darkness, Kara knew, were more secrets waiting to be pulled into the light. Drop a, if you know the real fight is the one they hope you never see. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow, I have a special story for you. Kara Hayes leaned over the weathered map spread across the briefing table, her thumb tapping a corner that had been folded and refolded so many times it looked ready to tear. Around her, the makeshift operations tent hummed with low voices, drone feeds flickering on portable screens, and the acrid scent of too much coffee left to burn in metal pots. She could feel the weight of the eyes around her. Miller's, Captain Rose, the commander's second in command, all of them waiting for her to say what they hadn't yet dared to admit. These silos aren't the only breach point, Kara said. Her voice was quiet, but the edges cut through the murmurs like wire. Look at the old transport routes. Supply tunnels here, and here. Whoever's moving contraband or intel through the base knows exactly how to slip under our sensors. Or worse, our noses. She tapped her diagnostic wand on the map again. The patch on her sleeve brushed the paper, the stitching rough under her fingertip, a reminder that she hadn't earned this spot by accident. Drop A, if you've ever had to stand your ground when everyone's looking for someone to blame. Miller spoke first, arms crossed, eyes flicking from her to the map. So what? Someone's got a pipeline running under our boots and no one noticed. Someone did notice, Kara shot back. They just didn't want to see what it meant. Rose shifted beside her, the old scar on his cheek creasing when he frowned. You're saying we've been compromised for longer than we knew. Kara didn't flinch. I'm saying we've been blind in the places we thought were safe. The silos, the tunnels, their pressure points. If we don't lock them down now, we're inviting more than infiltration. The commander's aide cleared his throat. And you think your Tech Corps unit can secure all this? Kara's eyes snapped to his. I know we can. And you know why? Because no one else ever cared enough to look. By sundown, Kara was back in the tunnels, the drone feed strapped to her wrist like a living artery. The darkness swallowed her flashlight beam as she crawled through a half-collapsed supply route under Sector Epsilon, a corridor so old the walls sweated rust. Above her, the base carried on like nothing had changed. But in these tunnels she could feel it like walking veins that pulsed with secrets. No one wanted to surface. She slipped past a section where old supply racks sagged under the weight of decades. Every so often, her gloved hand brushed a half-buried crate stamped with outdated clearance codes. Evidence that many someones had come and gone without tripping an alarm. Halfway down the corridor, her diagnostic wand blinked red. She froze. The signal was faint, buried behind a steel bulkhead that shouldn't have had any active power lines at all. Drop. If you've ever known that some locked doors stay locked for a reason, she keyed her come. Miller, I'm at the old Epsilon Junction. Picking up a heat source, small but stable. Static cracked back. You want backup? She hesitated. The old Kara would have said yes, but the patch under her sleeve reminded her that what she found next might not wait for consensus. Negative. Keep the drones tight around the outer passage. If I'm not back in 20, we come in guns up. Copy. Kara rolled her shoulders, exhaled once, then slipped her tools from the kit strapped to her hip. The bulkhead's lock was a relic, rusted, layered with security codes from 3 decommissioned commands. She cracked them one by one, feeling her mother's calm instructions guiding her fingertips. When the panel hissed open, stale air rushed out. carrying the scent of old fuel and something acrid beneath. She slipped inside. The hidden room was small, barely wide enough for two people to stand shoulder to shoulder. Old server racks lined the walls, their lights blinking just enough to show they were alive. A battered folding chair sat next to a metal crate, and on the crate rested an old comm relay, its dish aimed at the ceiling. Like an ear straining for whispers, Kara's breath misted in the cold. She knelt by the relay, fingers brushing dust from the panel. The power readout was jury-rigged new batteries spliced into old circuits. A patch job, but a clever one. Someone had been down here, feeding this ghost node just enough juice to broadcast maybe to listen. She keyed her comm again. Found a live relay, broadcasting on an encrypted band, not ours. Miller's voice sharpened. You think they're listening now? Kara traced the relay's wiring back to the rack. She pulled her diagnostic wand, patched in, and watched the data pulse across her display like a heartbeat out of sync. They're not listening, she said, voice flat. They're waiting for someone to answer. Droppa, if you've ever found something you wished you hadn't. She worked fast, her tools clinking against metal, each spark from the relay a tiny lightning bolt in the dark. She captured the transmission logs, ghost images of coded messages that would keep the analysts awake for weeks. Then she spliced in a signal blocker, her mind running through old field tricks her father had drilled into her with bored patience and relentless repetition. When she stepped back, the relay was silent, its dish still pointed up, but deaf now, dead. Miller's boots crunched behind her a moment later. He whistled low. A live tap under our feet for how long? Kara shrugged. Long enough. He nudged the dish with his boot. The brass are gonna love this. She almost laughed, the sound dry in her throat. They'll hate it. But they'll have to deal with it now. Back topside, the sun was just breaking through the clouds. The compound bathed in the clean, bright light that made all the shadows stand out sharper. Kara turned her patch over in her fingers, feeling every frayed thread. It wasn't just a symbol anymore. It was a promise to see what no one else would, to stand where others turned back. Droppa, if you've ever realized, your worst day made you the best for the job. The base commander waited near the helipad, arms crossed, eyes flicking from Kara's dirt-smeared uniform to the data stick in her hand. You know what this means, don't you, Lieutenant? He said quietly. Kara met his gaze without blinking. Yeah, it means they're not the only ones listening. He cracked a rare, thin smile. Get some sleep. You'll brief the Joint Chiefs tomorrow. They'll want to hear it from the one who found the ghosts in our walls. Kara turned to look back at the compound. Floodlights flickered off as the morning sun took their place, but she knew better light didn't banish secrets. It just made you fight harder to see what stayed hidden. She ran her thumb over her patch one more time, its edges rough but unbroken. Droppa, if you know you'd do it all over again, even when no one's looking. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow, I have a special story for you. Kara Hayes' boots echoed through the sterile corridor outside the Joint Chiefs briefing chamber, each step landing like the tick of a clock winding toward zero. The datapad in her hand felt heavier than her entire field kit packed with the raw transmission logs and decrypted coordinates she'd dragged out of the ghost relay below the compound. It wasn't just evidence anymore. It was a confession waiting to be spoken. She paused outside the double doors, fingers brushing the Tech Core's patch on her sleeve. The stitching was worn smooth from nights she'd spent tracing it, steadying herself before she crawled into some dark tunnel no one else would touch. She thought of her father's voice, sharp when he needed it to be, but steady when she needed that more. Courage is what you do when nobody thanks you for it. Droppa, if you've ever carried the truth when it would have been easier to stay quiet. Inside, the chamber was all cold angles and polished stone. The air scrubbed too clean by decades-old filtration systems, that hummed louder than the voices that filled the seats. 5 men and women sat behind the raised horseshoe desk, their uniforms crisp, their insignia glittering with a weight Kara's patch had never been allowed to hold. Captain Rowe sat in the back, arms folded, eyes never leaving Kara's. Sergeant. Miller leaned against the far wall, as if daring anyone to cut her off. The commander gestured her forward. Lieutenant Hayes, the floor is yours. She keyed the projector on her pad. The wall behind her filled with shifting lines of code ghost. Signals arcing across old tunnels. Silo maps overlapping supply routes like veins under brittle skin. 3 months ago, the base flagged an anomaly in the Western Quarantine Wing. She began, her voice steady despite the sharp stabs of doubt in her gut. 1 breach became 2. The tunnels weren't abandoned, they were repurposed. And when we found the relay, it confirmed what the sensors couldn't. Someone was talking to us from inside our own walls. And they expected we wouldn't listen. A general cleared his throat. Lieutenant, you're suggesting there's an infiltration. Cell using decommissioned supply routes right under our perimeter. That's a bold. Kara didn't flinch. It's not bold, sir. It's fact. She thumbed the next slide, raw transmission bursts blinking like dying stars. This relay pulled classified power feeds from 4 different base systems. It was old, patched with junk parts, but the line was clear enough. Whoever tapped it knows where we're blind, and they're not done. Drop if you've ever had to stare down the people who could make you disappear for saying what needed saying. Rowe spoke from the back. And who do you think they're working for, Lieutenant? Kara met his eyes, then the commander's. Then the chief's cold stares. I don't know yet. But if they're using old nodes like this one, there's more. And if they're listening, they're waiting for us to look away again. A thick silence stretched across the chamber. Kara felt the weight of it settle in her shoulders, pressing every old scar she'd carried from nights spent patching circuits while the world pretended her patch didn't matter. Finally, the commander leaned forward, voice low enough she almost had to strain to hear. And what do you propose we do? Kara looked down at the projection, an ugly web of forgotten tunnels, half-sealed chambers, broken promises painted in infrared. You let my unit map every meter of these corridors. You let us follow every ghost signal until we see who's behind the next wall, and when we do, you let us finish it. They voted without leaving the chamber. When Kara stepped back into the corridor, the datapad clutched under her arm. She could feel the new weight settle around her patch like an extra layer of stitching. Miller fell in beside her, a grin tugging at the edge of his mouth. So, Joint, Chiefs gave you the keys to the kingdom, huh? She shook her head. They gave me a flashlight and told me not to trip over the monsters. Rowe caught up, falling into step on her other side. If this goes bad, you know what they'll say. That tech core should have stuck to drones and patching circuits. Kara traced the patch with her thumb. Then we don't let it go bad. Drop. If you've ever been told to stay in your lane when you knew the road was broken. They started that night. Kara and her unit moved like shadows through corridors so old, the air tasted like dust and regret. She led them through half-collapsed junctions, old fuel storage rooms that still reeked of stale diesel, service elevators with cables so corroded she could hear them groan with every shift of weight. Her diagnostic wand pulsed red, every few meters signal. Echoes, data spikes where the old relay's code bled into the tunnels. She left tiny sensors behind, magnetic eyes blinking in the dark, knitting a net that would tighten every time someone tried to slip through. Halfway through the crawl, Miller whispered, "Why is this your fight, Hayes?" Plenty of people would have passed it up. She didn't break stride, because plenty did. And that's why we're here. Hours bled into dawn. They surfaced through a maintenance hatch so far outside the main compound, it felt like stepping onto another planet. Kara stood on the frost-hardened grass, the cold stinging her lungs. The lights of the base, a distant constellation. Rowe climbed up behind her, brushing dirt from his sleeves. "You think they'll come through tonight?" Kara adjusted her patch, eyes fixed on the horizon where the sun threatened to burn away the shadows. "I think they're already here. They're just waiting for us to blink. Drop a if you've ever stayed awake, just to make sure nobody else fell asleep at the switch." They rotated shifts every 6 hours. Tech Corps operators posted at the mouths of tunnels. Tripwire drones drifting on silent rotors, thermal cams, patched into Kara's feed like a second heartbeat. Twice she caught herself drifting off at her desk, only to snap awake when a red ping lit up her screen. False alarms, field rats. A stray dog once, its ribs showing through mangy fur before. It darted off into the dark. The real hit came 3 days later. A squad from the western fence radioed a trip on the outer net. By the time Kara arrived, the operators were ringed around a figure on its knees in the dirt, a man in battered tactical gear, a Tech Corps patch stitched crooked over an unfamiliar unit insignia. The patch was what made her stomach twist. It wasn't just the colors, it was the fact that it looked almost exactly like hers. Almost. She knelt in front of him, eyes narrowing. "Who are you?" His smile was cracked and bloody, but it spread across his face like an old wound reopening. "I'm what they forgot about, Lieutenant. And you're too late." He spat blood in the dirt before passing out. Hours later, the debrief with the commander was colder than the wind that battered the ops tent. Kara tossed the fake patch onto the table, the thread still stiff with dirt and dried blood. "They're mocking us now," Miller growled. "That's what this is." Kara's mind spun back to every time someone had brushed off the Tech Corps as background noise wires and drones and people who didn't need to be seen until something broke. Now someone was using that blindness like a blade. "They want us to look inward," she said, voice low. "They want us chasing ghosts so we miss the real hand on the knife." The commander's eyes flicked to her, and she met his stare, steady as the heartbeat in her wristband feed. "Then we stop playing the game they want. We make them come to us." Drop a if you've ever known the best defense is to become the bait. They rigged the tunnels with more than sensors that night. Kara's unit operators, who'd once rolled their eyes when she calibrated drone wings and bypassed blown circuits, now watched her hands like students at a master's workbench. Every tripwire node, every frequency spike, every dummy relay set to ping on old bands. A map of lies to catch the one truth that still slipped through her fingers. By sunrise, the compound was a fortress in reverse, open enough to tempt the rats, sealed enough to snap shut when the teeth found flesh. Kara traced her patch with her thumb as the first new signal flickered across her screen. One more ghost in the dark, and this time she was waiting. Drop a if you'd sit in the dark for as long as it took to prove you were right. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow, I have a special story for you. The lights in Kara Hayes' quarters flickered like fireflies caught in a jar, the old wiring humming a tired protest against the bitter wind rattling the windows. She sat cross-legged on her bunk, her diagnostic wand glowing soft green where it balanced on her knee. Across from her, the portable command tablet buzzed with static tripwire nodes, pulsing like tiny heartbeats across the underground map she'd sketched by hand. A week ago, the tunnels had been empty. Now they felt alive, each hidden corridor, breathing in sync with the ghosts who'd once used them as safe passage. She'd set the bait, her net woven tighter than any perimeter fence ever could be. And still, her mind traced every frayed edge, every sensor she couldn't place eyes on in real time. She thumbed the Tech Corps patch stitched to her sleeve, the edges rough from hours spent brushing it like a worry stone. It felt heavier tonight. Drop a if you've ever felt the weight of something that once felt small. A sharp buzz snapped her eyes up. The CUM relay on her desk spat static before a coded ping pushed through Node 12, West Tunnel. A single red pulse, then silence. She leaned closer, breath fogging the dusty screen. "Not a rat," she whispered. That's too clean. She snapped her field kit shut, slung it over her shoulder, and pulled the respirator over her mouth. By the time she hit the corridor, her boots pounded the grating like warning shots. Miller met her at the north stairwell, rifle balanced against his chest. Node 12? That's the old power conduit line. No way they'd risk coming through there. She didn't stop moving, unless they want us to think that. Cover the east exit. If they double back, we catch them in the crawl space. He grunted approval, falling in behind her. Got a feeling this one's gonna hurt. Droppa, if you've ever walked towards something knowing it might break you. They slipped through the lower passageway in total blackout, no helmet lamps, no overheads, just the soft flicker of Kara's wrist display, casting shadows on rusted pipes and cables, thick with frost. The cold bit through her gloves, each metal rung of the ladder burning her palms as they dropped into the conduit shaft. The old power line was barely wider than a supply crate, walls lined with corroded cables that hummed with just enough static to make her teeth itch. Halfway down the shaft, she felt it movement in the stale air, the faintest scrape of boots against metal that didn't belong to them. She motioned to Miller, 2 fingers slicing left. He shifted his weight, rifle up, eyes scanning the pitch. Kara edged forward, her pulse hammering so loud she swore the intruder could hear it. She brushed her fingers along the wall, feeling for vibrations, listening for the hitch in the hum. That meant something was alive in the darkness, a whisper of static. Then a boot skidded. The shape lunged out of the dark, low and fast. She met him halfway, shoulder driving up into his chest as they slammed against the wall. Pain flared along her ribs, but she rode the momentum, wrenching the figure around, until his mask caught on a jagged conduit bracket. Miller was there in seconds, rifle butt cracking across the intruder's jaw. The man crumpled, gasping through a torn mask. "Tech Core's patch again," Miller hissed, ripping at the man's collar. "What the hell is this?" But Kara's eyes were already on the man's gear standard issue. But the patches were too new, the thread lines wrong. A counterfeit uniform in a place no one should have known how to reach. Droppa, if you've ever realized someone was using your own name to hide. They dragged the intruder topside, half-conscious, boots leaving a smear of tunnel grime on the metal floor. In the ops tent, Captain Rowe loomed over the table, his eyes flicking from the man's fake patch to the schematics. Kara unrolled in front of him. "They're not trying to breach anymore," Kara said, her voice low but sharp. "They're testing our net. They want to know where we'll blink first." Rowe's jaw tightened. "So we tighten it." Kara shook her head. "We widen it. We let them think they're winning." Miller shot her a look. "You're saying we fake the gaps?" She met his eyes. "I'm saying we build the trap they think they've found themselves. And when they come for the real target, we don't just catch one rat, we catch the nest." Droppa, if you've ever had to beat someone by letting them think they're beating you. They worked through 3 dawns without sleep. Kara at the center of the ops bay floor. Diagrams taped across the walls, tripwire drones drifting above. Like steel ghosts. Each passage she marked in red meant a fake breach point. Each blue mark was real. A corridor that would swallow anyone foolish enough to trust old maps. Her Tech Core's unit moved like a living nervous system. Now operator, she'd trained herself rewiring drone feeds, patching sensor loops that flickered to look broken, all while hidden eyes waited in the dark. The night they sprung it, Kara stood at Node 27, the deepest crawl space under the old fuel bunkers. Frost dripped from the walls where old insulation cracked decades ago. Her breath ghosted through her mask as she checked the wand's pulse. Red spike. Then 3 more in quick staccato. Miller's voice crackled in her ear. "They took the bait. Moving now." She clicked her come once confirmation. A figure slipped into the passage, ducking low under rusted beams, gear rattling like bones in a tin box. He paused, scanned the sensor node Kara had made sure flickered just enough to look patchable. She waited until he was 3 steps past the kill line. Then she stepped out, rifle up, pulse steady. The man spun, weapon half raised, but the pop of Miller's tranq dart echoed like a hammer strike. He hit the wall and slid down dead weight. 1 down. By dawn, they'd pulled 6 more from the dark, each wearing the fake patch, each silent as stone when dragged to the holding cells. Droppa, if you've ever seen proof that a shadow's shape tells you everything about what cast it. The debrief with the commander was brutal. Kara laid the fake patches on the table like war trophies, the threads stiff with dirt and blood. She pointed to the last map red lines, all converging on the same buried node near the south perimeter. "This is the nest," she said. "They've been running lines through it for months. Maybe years. We shut it down there." The commander's fingers drummed the table. "And if you're wrong?" Kara looked at her patch, her real one, every stitch earned. "Then they'll bury me there. But they won't run it through us again." Miller grinned, teeth white in the flickering light. "Then let's give him a burial worth writing down." Ro leaned in. "When?" Kara's eyes flicked to the clock on the wall. "Now." "Droppa, if you've ever known you'd stake your name on the last shot you'd get, before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow, I have a special story for you." The south perimeter node wasn't a room so much as an old crawl space wedged between crumbling concrete walls, the air tasting like rust and forgotten rain. Kara Hayes crouched under a corroded beam, her diagnostic wand pulsing dull green as her breath fogged the mask covering her mouth. Around her, her tech cores unit worked in near-silence tripwire drones flitting through shadows, cables unspooling like veins across the cold floor. Above them, the base roared on like nothing was wrong, convoys rattling over frostbitten asphalt, sirens wailing somewhere near the east fence. But down here, the base was a skeleton, every rib cracked open for anyone willing to crawl far enough into the dark. Kara thumbed her patch soaked through with grime, the stitching rough where it scraped her glove. She let herself feel the weight of it, just for a heartbeat. Then she clicked her cum. "Status," she murmured. Sergeant Miller's voice came through like gravel. "North corridor sealed. 2 teams on the fallback line. Ro's squad is running the decoy on the west side. If they're coming here." Kara breathed in the wet, cold air. "Then let 'em come. Droppa, if you've ever stood your ground in the one place everyone else called hopeless." They didn't wait long. The first ping hit Kara's wrist display just past 0200 hours, a sharp pulse of heat signature, fast and small like a scout rat. She crouched lower, eyes flicking to the drone feed as a figure crawled through a side shaft. Mask fogged, uniform patch the same counterfeit tech cores, insignia that had become their calling card. They were bold now, too bold. That's what told Kara they were close to panicking. Real ghosts didn't show up where you were ready. Amateurs got sloppy when you made the dark feel safe. Miller leaned beside her, rifle balanced across his knees. 1, maybe 2 more behind him. We take 'em here?" Kara shook her head. "We follow them. Let them feel the net close on their skin." The crawl was tight enough to make her shoulders ache, gear scraping metal with every inch forward. She felt the relay cables vibrating under her gloves, old voice lines that once carried orders from an era when her mother's medic unit patched wounds by oil lamp and her father's sniper scope never missed its mark. Now they carried this, the heartbeat of betrayal hidden under her boots for years. Ahead, the scout stopped at a rusted junction. He didn't know the tripwire drone above his head was real, not the fake flicker Kara had left to bait the last batch. He reached for the relay, patching a tiny box the size of a pack of smokes onto the node. A relay bug fresh, blinking green. Kara's gut went cold. They were still sending out. She keyed her cum. "Do not engage yet." Miller's voice dropped to a whisper. "If he trips the alarm, the nest scrambles. We can't let him run." Wait for the second. Drop a, if you've ever held your breath longer than you thought possible just to get the moment right. Seconds stretched like hours. Another shape slipped in behind the scout larger. A bulkier pack slung across one shoulder, gear cleaner than any tunnel rat Kara had ever pulled from the dark. She tracked the way he moved, no wasted steps, eyes flicking every shadow, trained. Not local muscle. When he reached the relay, he tapped the scout's shoulder. Words exchanged, too muffled to catch. The scout turned to leave. Kara clicked her come once. The pop of Miller's dart gun sounded like a thunderclap in the crawlspace. The scout pitched forward, face first into the mud. The second man spun, reaching for a sidearm, but Kara was already on him, shoulder into his chest. Diagnostic wand jamming under his chin with a sharp snap. He slammed back into the concrete. Wall, boots kicking. Kara held him pinned, her forearm digging into the padded collar of his jacket. Who's on the other side? She hissed. He laughed, a short, sharp bark that made her blood run colder than the floor. Doesn't matter. You'll see us soon enough. She glanced at the patch on his sleeve, a Tech Corps insignia spliced with an old unit number she'd never seen. She ripped it free, shoving it into her pocket. Pull him out, she ordered. Bring the gear. We find the nest tonight. Drop. A. If you've ever realized the snake was bigger than you thought, and you didn't flinch. Back topside. The prisoner sat strapped to a battered chair in the old fuel depot office. Light flickered overhead, dust swirling like ghosts of every fire that place had ever seen. Kara leaned against the wall, patch still clutched in her gloved hand. Rowe stood across from the man, arms folded. Miller hovered near the door, boots planted wide, eyes narrowed. Where's your handler? Rowe asked. His voice was calm, too calm. The man spat blood on the concrete. Closer than you think. Kara stepped forward. That relay, where was it sending? Who's pulling your strings? He laughed again, the sound scraping her patience raw. You think this base is yours? You've been living in our hallways for years. You just never bothered to turn on the lights. Rowe shot Kara a look, permission or a question. She didn't care. She grabbed the man's mask, yanking it clear. A thin scar ran from his temple to his jaw, the stitches fresh enough to gleam. Under the lamp. Who patched you up? She said. Who stitched you when your crew left you bleeding? His eyes flicked, just once toward the storage crates, stacked behind them. Kara caught it. She drew her sidearm, motioning Miller over. Check. The crates, now. Drop 'em. If you've ever trusted your gut when your head was screaming, it couldn't be true. Miller cracked open the largest crate, prying the lid loose with the butt of his rifle. Inside, rows of sealed med kits newer than anything Kara's unit ever used, packed with bandages, clotting gauze, smart stitch injectors that could patch a gut wound in 60 seconds. Tech Corps insignia on every kit. Stamped fresh. Rowe's voice rumbled low. How the hell did they get our stock? Kara's pulse thudded in her throat. They didn't get it. Someone gave it, from inside. She stepped back, the room spinning just enough to make the bare bulb overhead flare like a second sun. This isn't a breach, it's a bleed. Drop a, if you've ever felt the moment you realized the enemy was wearing your uniform. They cleared the depot by dawn. Crates tagged and locked down, the prisoner carted off. Under armed guard. Kara stood at the edge of the compound yard, frost crunching under her boots. She stared out across the perimeter where the fence line cut the world into safe and unsafe, an illusion she'd outgrown long ago. Rowe stepped up beside her, the sun just cresting the old guard towers. This goes higher than tunnels, Hayes. They've got people in the supply chain, maybe in procurement, maybe deeper. Kara's thumb ran over her patch again. Then we trace every crate, every drop line, every phantom signal they've left in our veins. Rowe exhaled, the fog of it caught by the wind. What happens when we find them? She turned, her eyes cold. We remind them who this patch belongs to. Drop a they if you've ever sworn to clean your house before you fix the street. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow, I have a special story for you. Snow fell in thin, sharp lines over the base as Kara Hayes stood on the edge of the supply yard, eyes narrowed against the swirling flakes. Each breath misted through her respirator, the weight of her patched uniform pressing down like a second skin. Behind her, trucks rumbled in and out. Operators checked manifests twice over, and new security checkpoints glowed under harsh floodlights. It wasn't enough. Not yet. She thumbed her diagnostic wand, the metal warm against her glove even in the bitter wind. The stolen medical kits had been tagged and tracked back to the last legit drop point. Warehouse Delta, a hangar so big it could swallow half the compound in its shadow. It had always been just a storage zone, so ordinary it became invisible. If you've ever realized the hiding place is always in plain sight. Sergeant Miller jogged up beside her, his mask pulled low on his chin, eyes bloodshot from too many nights under the blackout lights. Scouts just checked the west corridor, looks clean. If they're bleeding our gear through Delta, it's on a timer. Kara's lips tightened under her mask. Then we run the clock out on our terms. He raised an eyebrow. How deep you wanna go on this one? She let her thumb drift over her patch, feeling every thread, every knot that tied her to the fight she'd chosen. All the way. Inside Warehouse Delta, the air tasted like cold steel and engine oil. Rows of crates towered in. Narrow lanes stacked, shrink-wrapped, stamped with clearance codes Kara knew by heart. She slipped between the stacks, Miller and two TechCorps operators flanking her, their boots muffled against the concrete floor. Her wand pulsed as they passed each row, a dull green glow lighting up the stenciled labels: field rations, drone, batteries, standard medkits. Too clean. Too normal. She stopped at a crate near the far wall, one corner splintered just enough to catch her eye. She knelt, brushing frost off the surface. The TechCorps insignia stared back at her, crisp and fresh, but the serial code, one number reversed, subtle, easy to miss. She keyed her come. Get the drones up. We're not the only ones crawling these aisles tonight. If you've ever felt the world hold its breath while you look for the crack in the wall. It took an hour to find it, a false pallet sunk into the concrete, disguised with old packing foam and a rusted steel lid. Kara traced the seam with her wand. A low beep confirmed what her gut had already told her. Miller crouched beside her. What's under there, you think? Kara didn't answer. She just slipped her tool roll free, her fingers moving in a silent dance her mother would have recognized. Steady hands, delicate cuts. Don't force the lock. Make it open itself. The lid popped with a sharp crack. A shaft of warm air hissed up, stale and rank like old sweat. Kara ducked lower, eyes adjusting to the darkness below. A ladder, corroded but intact, disappeared into the black. She looked at Miller. They didn't just take our kits. They've been staging under our supply line the whole time. If you've ever had to look down a hole you knew you couldn't unsee. They dropped one by one, boots clanging off the rungs, their shadows swallowed whole by the dark. At the bottom, the hidden chamber stretched wide, a maze of old power converters. Stacks of ration packs, crates cracked open and picked over like bones. A faint hum drifted through the room generators, jury-rigged to pull power from the warehouse. Above, in the far corner, Kara spotted what she'd feared. A fresh relay dish, twin to the ghost node she'd found in the old tunnels. She moved toward it, every sense alive, the air tight in her lungs. Her wand danced across the relay's casing, fresh. Solder, spliced wires, a signal booster not more than a week old. They hadn't just built this. They were using it. Tonight, Miller's voice broke the hush. Contacts, 3, maybe 4. North alcove. Kara spun, eyes locking on the shadows, shifting near a stack of ration crates. She raised her rifle. pulse thudding so hard she felt it in her teeth. "This is Tech Corps," she called out, voice echoing. "Step out, now." One figure emerged, young, maybe 20, mask smeared with tunnel grime. A fake patch clung to his sleeve, half peeled from the damp. Droppa, if you've ever seen your own name turned into someone else's shield. He lifted his hands, palms up. "Lieutenant Hayes," he said, voice too steady for the sweat shining under his eyes. "You're too late." She took a step forward. "Who gave you the kits? Who's running this bleed?" He smirked, just a hairline crack of defiance. "You'll see." Behind him, a low click echoed. Miller cursed under his breath, spinning his rifle as another shape lunged from the shadows. Slamming a shoulder into his chest, the room exploded. In movement shouts, boots scraping concrete, gear crashing to the floor. Kara caught the young man's collar as he tried to slip past her. He twisted, driving an elbow into her ribs, but she barely felt it. She slammed him into the generator housing, the hum rattling her bones. "Who's your handler?" she spat. "Who runs you?" His grin cracked wider. "Same man who read your patch." "Lieutenant." Kara's heart stuttered. "What?" He shoved off her chest, the motion ripping the fake patch clean from his sleeve. Beneath it, a real one glowed Tech Corps, but older, faded by sun and sweat. "You're not the first," he hissed. "Miller's." Trank dart hit him mid-sentence. The young man dropped, mouth frozen in that grin that made Kara's blood run cold. Droppa, if you've ever felt the ground shift under you in a single word. They secured the bunker by sunrise. Kara sat on the generator housing, mask pulled. Low, thumb brushing the stolen patch between her fingertips. Her thoughts spiraled through every line she'd drawn, every net she'd tightened, only to find out someone else had worn her colors before, someone who'd bent the badge she'd bled for. Rowe crouched in front of her, eyes level. Who was he talking about? She didn't look up. The commander. Or whoever wears his face. Miller leaned against the wall, boots crunching broken plastic. That's insane. The commander? Kara's jaw clenched so hard it hurt. We've been cleaning house while someone inside's been propping up the ghosts. Selling the patch to anyone who'll bleed under it. Rowe's voice dropped to a whisper. You sure? She flicked the patch onto the floor between them. I am now. Drop it if you've ever realized your worst enemy was your shield's biggest. Crack. They hauled the prisoners out. The fake patches stacked in plastic evidence bags that glowed under the stark floodlights. Kara stood at the edge of the motor pool, eyes on the eastern gate where the commander's convoy pulled in like royalty, arriving at its own execution. He stepped out pressed fatigues, insignia glinting cold and sharp. His eyes found hers instantly. Flicking to the patch on her sleeve, then to the evidence crates lined up like coffins. Lieutenant Hayes, he said, voice smooth as an unbroken window. Interesting night. She didn't salute. Didn't move. Just let the cold eat her bones while her unit closed ranks behind her. You've got questions, I'm sure, he continued, eyes flicking to Rowe, then Miller. Let's get you debriefed. Kara cut him off. No, you get debriefed. The words tasted like battery acid on her tongue. You knew, you fed them. You let this patch become a ghost mask so no one would see the truth. The commander's smile was thin. Careful, Lieutenant. That's a heavy accusation. Kara stepped forward, the patch on her sleeve brushing her chest like a heartbeat. I'm not accusing you. I'm reading you your signature. Rowe's rifle lifted a hair. Miller's hand hovered over his sidearm. In that second, the cold felt like fire. Kara realized the fight wasn't underground anymore. It was right here. In the light, Droppa, if you've ever stood your ground when the storm wore your own uniform. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow, I have a special story for you. Snow spun sideways through the motor pool yard as Kara Hayes stood 10 paces from the commander, her breath fogging the frozen air. her pulse thudding so loud she wondered if Miller or Rowe could hear it too. The convoy behind him idled like a line of chained beasts, exhaust curling into the pale dawn. His insignia gleamed sharp against his chest, but Kara didn't look at the brass. She kept her eyes on his face. It was too calm. "You're stepping out of line, Lieutenant," the commander said. His voice was that same silk-smooth threat he used on the rookies who forgot to salute. "These accusations, where do you think they'll land you?" Kara thumbed the edge of her patch. It felt heavier than any medal, any promotion, any praise she'd ever been given. "Right where I need to stand." She flicked her wrist. Miller dropped the evidence crate onto the icy ground. Fake Tech Corps patches tumbled across the concrete like a trail of shredded flags. Crates of stolen med kits. The Ghost relay module. Cracked open, its circuits still warm from the power lines they'd tapped. Rowe stepped forward, rifle across his chest but not quite aimed. "Answer her, sir." The commander's jaw ticked, a hairline crack in his perfect calm. "You're accusing me of running a shadow cell through my own compound." Kara's eyes didn't blink. "I'm not accusing you. I'm reading your playbook. You left ghosts in our walls so we'd chase shadows instead of the truth. You bled the patch until it became a disguise for every lie you needed hidden. Droppa, if you've ever called out the thing everyone else pretended not to see. The wind picked up, rattling the perimeter gates. Beyond the wire, the world felt vast and open, but inside this yard, it was a cage too small for the storm. Brewing under Kara's ribs. "You think this little squad of yours will save you?" the commander asked. "These men behind you, they'll go back to obeying orders the second you're done running your mouth." Miller's boots crunched closer. "Try us," Rowe spoke low. "You sold our patch, you sold her name. Now you're gonna stand here and lie about it to the people who bled for it?" The commander's smile turned thin as a razor. "Prove it." Kara stepped forward until she could smell the old gun oil on his jacket. She raised her diagnostic wand, the same battered tool she'd used to patch drones and soldiers alike. She jabbed the wand into the breast pocket of his uniform right, where a relay bug pulsed faint red dot click. Data spike. Her wristband display danced with ghost signals frequencies she'd traced through the tunnels, the silos, the stolen bunkers. All buried under his clearance codes. Rowe's jaw flexed. "Well, there's your signature." Miller's voice was a low growl. "What's your call, Lieutenant?" Kara's thumb brushed the Tech Corps patch once, twice. "We take it all down. Every tunnel, every ghost, every lie wearing our shield. Droppa, if you've ever felt a fight break inside you and stand up anyway, the standoff didn't explode in gunfire. It cracked like a fault line. Instead, orders barked across the yard, squads shifting their rifles from Kara's people to the commander's convoy. One by one, the operators realized they had a choice, the patch on their shoulder or the man who'd used it as a mask. A private lowered his weapon first, then another. Then half the outer cordon turned their eyes away from the commander. Altogether, the commander's voice sliced through the wind. "You think you've won something tonight? Hayes, you think these people will still stand by you when the brass writes you off as rogue?" Kara's laugh tasted like old smoke. "They'll stand by the patch, because now it means something again." He stepped closer, inches from her face. "You're a fool." She didn't flinch. "And you're done." Rowe grabbed his shoulder. Miller stepped in, cuffs clicking over the man's wrists. The commander didn't struggle. He just stared at Kara, that cold smirk etched into his eyes. "Droppa, if you've ever watched the lie fall apart while the liar kept smiling." The convoy was turned. Around by dawn, the disgraced brass loaded into armored transports that rumbled out under a sky too bright for what they'd done. Kara stood at the gates as they rolled past, her patch dark with sweat and snowmelt. She didn't wave. She didn't salute. She just watched them vanish behind the wire. Miller walked up beside her, slapping frost from his gloves. "Hell of a mess to clean up." Kara didn't look at him. Good. Means we still have something worth fighting for. Ro joined them, arms folded. The Joint Chiefs will want answers. They'll want to know why half the perimeter was run through a smuggling chain they never saw coming. Kara shrugged. They'll get their answers. And they'll get the bill. Miller barked a laugh. What about you? Gonna stand up there and testify with that patch on your sleeve? Kara ran her thumb across the threads frayed now, stained with days she'd never wash out. I don't testify for them. I stand for the people who carry this for real. Droppa. If you've ever learned the cost of loyalty is that you don't get to pick when it ends. That night, she sat alone in her quarters, boots unlaced, gear stripped down to bare canvas and cold metal. She spread her kit on her bunk wand, cum relay, tiny folding blade her father had given her when she was 15. The patch lay at the center, pinned under her palm like an anchor dot. She thought of her mother's voice. Steady hands save lives. She thought of her father's. Courage is the thing you do when no one's left to clap dot beyond the door. The compound buzzed like a stirred hive squad's moving gear. New locks hammered into old steel. Fresh eyes watching old shadows. Kara knew. The fight wasn't done. There would always be new ghosts. New lies waiting for darkness. But now, the patch was hers again. Not a mask. Not a disguise. A promise. Droppa, if you'd choose the harder road just to make it mean something again. Before she slept, she keyed her wrist come one last time. A single message flashed on the small crack screen. Tomorrow. We dig deeper. She closed her eyes, her thumb resting over the shield embroidered on her arm. She smiled, not wide, but enough. They'd called her the ghost in the tunnels. Now they'd see the ghost was real, and she had a name. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow, I have a special story for you. The base woke under a bruised dawn. The sky cracked open in streaks of ash and pearl as Kara Hayes stepped out onto the old training yard. The frost bit into her boots, but the cold felt good like a slap to remind her the shadows hadn't won. Not yet. Behind her, the compound pulsed like a wounded animal still learning how to stand. Squads tearing down old barricades, fresh tripwire drones spinning out new perimeters, the last crates of stolen gear locked down under a watch that wouldn't blink again. She could feel them watching her now. Tech Corps rookies, old operators who'd once laughed at the girl with the diagnostic wand and the patch nobody noticed. Now they waited to see what she'd do next. She thumbed the edges of that patch as she crossed the lot, the threadwork rough but unbroken. The badge that had hidden ghosts was visible again, raw, real, undeniable. Droppa, if you've ever stood on ground you refuse to let break you. Sergeant Miller caught up to her at the edge of Hangar 5, a cigarette tucked behind one ear. He'd never light inside the fence. HQ's sending a liaison, he said. Brass wants the full crawl maps, logs, every rat hole you and your unit cracked open. Kara's laugh was low, dry. They want their neat ending. Yeah. Miller flicked ash off his glove. You gonna give it to him? She shrugged, boots crunching. Over old oil stains. They get the story. But they don't get to rewrite the cost. Inside Hangar 5, the echo of drone wings sounded like an angry swarm. Operators hunched over crates of stripped cum gear, tagging every wire that had once carried a stolen word. Ro leaned over a workbench, eyes flicking up as Kara approached. Lieutenant, he said, nodding at the patch on her arm. There. Saying Joint Chiefs want to rebrand Tech Corps, new emblem. New command line, all shiny again, Kara snorted. New paint doesn't clean dirty hands, Ro grinned. And you? They want you topside testify, debrief, probably parade you in front of every camera they've got. She ran her thumb across the patch again. I didn't bleed for the spotlight. Droppa, if you've ever handed someone the truth, knowing they'd try to spin it, they spread the maps out over the workbench, hand-sketched corridors, scanned. Heat signatures, relay frequencies that looped like ghost veins through the base's spine. Miller tapped the silos. This was the choke. Blew the lid off everything. Kara pointed at the oldest tunnels. Not the choke. The wound. They didn't dig it. They found it waiting. They just knew nobody'd look twice. Ro exhaled. And now, they'll patch it with new walls, more locks, more eyes. She looked up, eyes cold. And they'll forget again. They always do. Miller grinned, teeth white in the dim light. Not while you're here. Kara said nothing. She just brushed the edge of her patch and thought of her father's voice. Measure twice. Breathe once. Shoot straight. The liaison arrived at dusk, a slick-haired major with polished boots and a smile. So bright it didn't belong in the same wind that cut through Kara's bones. He extended a crisp envelope, stamped with the new command seal. Lieutenant Hayes, he said, syrup-thick charm in his tone. On behalf of Joint Command, your service is recognized, and your actions have... She cut him off with a wave. Don't read me the script. His smile didn't slip. They're offering you full command of the Tech Corps' reformation. Central post. Unlimited resources. You'll have every tool you ever needed. Kara's eyes flicked past him, to the yard, where her unit tore out old sensors and soldered new tripwires by hand, boots muddy, sleeves torn, the real fight. Not the one in conference rooms. She looked back at the major. I've already got every tool I need. Lieutenant, he said, blinking. This is everything you fought for. I didn't fight for a corner office. She stepped closer, the patch on her sleeve brushing his chest. I fought so nobody could ever wear this and lie again. Drapa, if you've ever turned down the easy win because the hard truth was worth more. They left at dawn, the liaison. And his clean boots trailing out past the new checkpoints, eyes darting to every drone perched on the fences. Kara stayed behind, leaning against the rusted guard tower, watching her people rewire a net that would never sleep again. Ro dropped a fresh cup of bird coffee into her hand. So, she sipped it, lips cracking a smile. So they'll spin it. Medal, promotion, maybe a shiny title in the morning briefs. Miller barked a laugh. And the patch? Kara traced the edge. The patch stays right where it belongs, on the ones willing to get dirt under their nails. Ro's eyes gleamed. And you? She tilted her head to the perimeter. Me? I'll be right here. Because ghosts don't stay gone. They just wait for US to blink. Drapa, if you'd stand the last watch, because you know the next fight never sleeps. When the sun cracked the horizon, the base looked almost new, fences straight, tunnels sealed, the old bones patched with new steel. But Kara knew better. There would always be cracks, always be shadows, but now the patch on her sleeve didn't hide them. It marked the ones who'd find them, burn them out, stand the line nobody else wanted to stand. She could feel her father's voice in the hum of the dawn. Measure twice. Breathe once. Shoot straight. In her mother's steady hands save lives, and her own voice now. When she'd never let anyone else rewrite. Drapa, if you've ever promised to carry something heavy so nobody else would have to. When the wind shifted, Kara stepped back toward the drone bay, her boots crunching across frost that would melt. By noon, her team fell in beside her operators who'd once called her the girl in the corner with the broken wand. Now soldiers who'd call her the one who never let the lights go out. She didn't look back at the base's new towers. Didn't look at the flags flapping overhead. She just tapped the patch on her sleeve and let the last of the night burn away with the sunrise. They'd called her the ghost. Now they'd call her the light. The story took us a long time. If you like it, subscribe. Now back to the story. Tomorrow would bring more cracks, more hidden doors, more fake patches waiting to be ripped clean. But tonight, Kara Hayes knew the truth. Some ghosts never fade, and some patches, they never come off. 2 more great stories are next. Don't miss them. Subscribe and turn on notifications.